And for someone like me, who's not particularly easy to manage, or it doesn't take direction necessarily all that well. All you got to do is explain the mission, right? Explain the objectives, and then the agency's great at just, then once they've done that, they trust their people. You get on with it. You do the work, right? And they know they can count on these people, right? And so that's one of the things that I really took away from it that has stayed with me all my life.
This month on Insightful Inquiries, we sit down and talk with former CIA officer Mike Baker. Mike spent nearly 2 decades with the agency before transitioning to the private intelligence sector, where he co-founded Diligence, an investigations company specializing in complex cross-border inquiries. Mike regularly appears on a variety of networks as a subject matter expert on intelligence matters and world events. He is also the host of the Science Channel's hit television show, Black Files Declassified, where he investigates top-secret government programs steeped in cutting-edge science. Season 2 of Black Files Declassified premieres on March 9th on the Science Channel and can also be streamed on Discovery+. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome Mike Baker, the company man, to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's good. It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere at this point in life.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the podcast.
No, of course.
I really do appreciate it. But if you wouldn't mind just giving, I know Tiana's given the introduction already, but if you wouldn't mind giving a little introduction about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Where to start? I was born in a small town in England.
It was a cold night.
It was a cold day. It was a damp, rainy day. I spent going on 20 years with the CIA's operations directorate, mostly focused on counterterrorism operations, counterinsurgency operations, counter-narcotics operations during those years. And all the time was overseas. I was one of those fortunate folks in the agency that didn't have a headquarters tour. It was a great experience. Absolutely loved it. Got out at a certain point because I was raising my daughter on my own and needed to actually be home. As it turns out, that's really all kids care about. She didn't care what the hell I was doing. She just wanted me to sit on the floor playing with the Legos. And so I had to...
As a father of 3 girls, I will admit the same. It doesn't matter what you do overseas and how much great stuff you've done. They don't care. It was all about
absolutely. Absolutely. It really doesn't matter to them. Got out at a certain point and started a company in the intelligence and security space, risk mitigation, security services, intel gathering, with a very, very good friend of mine who came out of the British teams, SBS, and then Live. And so we started building a company in London and ended up, with offices around the globe in a big operation in Iraq. And it was, it's been a really good ride. And we kind of bucked the trend. Nobody actually thought that the 2 knuckleheads with no business experience could make anything work. And we got very lucky. We hired wonderful people. We still continue to hire wonderful people. And we got great clients. And it's worked out remarkably well. And then at a certain point, I got involved in television and film production. Started doing a lot of news hits for various networks, coming out of the first effort in Iraq. And what I found from that was, for the news, as long as you don't say anything too moronic or fall off your chair, and too moronic is a pretty big playing field, then, you can keep coming back. And so it was a really good experience, and been doing that for a long time, involved in some television shows and some series. And so it's been good. It's been a great ride. And that brings us up to today. And I'm living in Idaho with the world's most wonderful woman. And we've got, I got my daughter, and then I've got 3 young boys and assorted animals and claymores around the perimeter, and it's all good.
So Putin cannot invade Mike Baker's house.
Wow, Putin.
Well, I'm glad you brought up.
Who saw that come?
Go back to This Week Explained, December 24th, 2021, where we predicted that. All right, I'll stop there. But I did want to say I have a buddy of mine who, coworker, former coworker. He wanted me to tell you thank you for, I think 2017, you were on Joe Rogan and you talked about how great Boise was. And he took that, he listened to it, and he moved out to Boise.
Nice.
And he loved it. And then you went on, I think, in 2020 and said you had to stop talking about Boise because everybody was upset. So he was glad to get in on the ground floor there. He wanted, Ian, this is for you. He wanted me to tell you, thank you, Mike Baker, for telling him that.
Yeah, now he owes me a beer at the Stagecoach.
Hey, I'll tell him.
Yeah, and so it's great. I have been told repeatedly by the good citizens of Idaho to stop talking about how great this state is. My wife is originally from here, which is how we ended up here. And she's sixth generation. Her great something grandfather was the territorial sheriff out here before it was the state.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I know. So, and he's a mean looking son of a bitch. They still got his picture up in the state house. Thank God my wife didn't get his looks. But
well, that's it. That's incredible. And I know I have talking points and all that we're going to get to. But first, I want to say you have your kids have some incredible names. Where'd that all come from?
Oh, yeah. They get some incredible names, some incredible traits too. Scooter and Sluggo and Muggsy. Those are their names. And the oldest one's Scooter. Youngest is Muggs and Muggsy and great kids. Couldn't ask for anything better. They're all, they're young still, relatively. They're all in school and doing great. But it's really, it's like that second, chance, right? Because my daughter's now, she's grown up. She's 27 and a wonderful person. And that was a wonderful experience raising her. But now you get the chance to do it again. I mean, good God, what more can you ask for? And so it's entertaining, and even when it's frustrating, or even when one of the knuckleheads does something incredibly stupid, and you're standing there looking at him, trying to figure out, how you explain life to them without kicking them in the ass, and then,
right,
but it's wonderful. And so anyway, yeah, very fortunate.
Yeah. So I wanted to start it out with your career in the CIA. You were counterterrorism in the CIA, operative, correct?
Yeah, I was in the operations directorate. Started there and finished there, and had a wonderful ride.
So are you out of Langley?
Well, yeah, Langley is what it's known as, the headquarters there in Virginia. Right. And bizarrely, you can drive down the George Washington Parkway. It still takes some getting used to it. There's a sign, pointing for CIA.
Yeah.
It's very helpful in case we have any hostile, intel services looking for us.
Right. Are you looking to put the bomb here? This is take this exit to CIA headquarters.
So it's right there. But yeah, I started out at a relatively young age and had a great time. Spent my time was spent overseas. There's a lot of different jobs in the agency. It's not just the operations group, right? There's a directorate of intelligence, there's admin, there's the science and technology, which I could spend all day talking about. That's where incredibly smart people go to work and develop some amazing capabilities and technology, which oftentimes end up in the general population, right? I mean, it ends up benefiting the rest of the world. It may have started as a intel requirement, as an operational requirement, and then gets out there. And whether you're talking about a battery that ends up in a pacemaker, whether you're talking about, satellite imagery, satellite capability that now helps the environment for environmental mapping, whatever it may be, they have done some incredible work in the S&T group. So there's lots of different, positions, professions, occupations within the agency. It's not just all, a bunch of, knuckle draggers in the operations group.
I think that's a good distinction because, when most people think of the CIA, they think of, clandestine, covert operations, but it really is a huge conglomerate of a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. That it really helps society out in the future.
Yeah, they do. It's an amazing. I mean, again, I'm subjective. People, will say, of course, he's going to, talk about it like this, but it's absolutely true. It's a very small organization compared to other government agencies, for sure. and it really punches above its weight. But it's chock full of everybody from engineers to data mining specialists to operations officers, finance specialists, analysts. It's just a really interesting mix of people and skills coming together to all do the same ultimate task, which is maintain national security, right? And respond to priority taskings from whatever administration sits in the White House.
Yeah, right. So I would say fun stories, but do you have, what is your favorite sort of operation, unclassed, obviously, that you were a part of, or what region that you were a part of that you feel was the most beneficial to you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk about operations for obvious reasons out here.
Right.
But in terms of, there's a couple of things, right? From at the 30,000 foot level, one of the great things about being with the agency, at least in what I did, was the amount of responsibility you're given, right? And for someone like me, who's not particularly easy to manage, or it doesn't take direction necessarily all that well. All you got to do is explain the mission, right? Explain the objectives. And then the agency's great at just, then once they've done that, they trust their people. You get on with it. You do the work, right? And they know they can count on these people, right? And so that's one of the things that I really took away from it that has stayed with me all my life, right? If you hire the right people, and you explain the mission properly, and then you don't micromanage and you get out of the way, right? Then good things are going to happen for the most part, right? And if they don't, if someone makes a mistake, then great, own up to it immediately, deal with it properly, and get back out there. So they do several things really well when it comes to management of their personnel. So that's one of those things that I took away. Region wise, around the world, I don't know. I've been asked that question. I've thought about it a lot in the past, and even my kids ask me, what's your favorite place? And it really varies. Asia, Southeast Asia. Loved things we were doing in the Middle East. At the same time, had a great time in certain parts of Europe and Eastern Europe. It's really kind of all over the place. And then Latin America. I know I've just basically named everywhere.
Everywhere on the globe. Mike Baker loves everywhere on the globe.
Yeah, you got good memories about all sorts of things. Sometimes things, went south and it turned into a goat rope. Right. But even that then, creates a memory that you think, yeah, that was really interesting. Sometimes you'd walk away from whatever it was that was happening. You'd think nobody else on the planet is doing this right now. Right. And that's right. That's what you're not doing it because you're getting paid on the government, civil service scale. Anyway, you're doing it for other reasons.
Yeah, I always said, my time spent at Bragg, I always said, I'll just say, when I was going through college, I was a history major. I always thought I'm going to be a history professor. I love history and all that kind of stuff. And then I got over to, got into the military, got over to Bragg and with JSOC, and I said, well, now I'm creating history. So
there's a difference between
teaching history.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the difference between reporting on something, being a journalist, which is a very admirable profession if you can find objective journalists anymore,
which is difficult. And I do push back against a lot of journalists, but I do respect the profession.
Yeah, it's tough. It's very tough if it's done right. And look, the world is divided between objective journalists, if there are such a thing, and opinion personnel, and that's fine. But yeah, you do feel like with the agency, and with the military and intel community, certain jobs, law enforcement's the same way, first responders, you feel like you're the pointy edge of the spear, and you're making a difference, in varying degrees. Sometimes you're sitting in a safe house for a couple of weeks waiting for something to kick off, and you think, I'm not sure if I'm making a difference sitting in here, but still.
or am I doing the right thing?
No, I never thought about that. I never.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm not one of those people who, sat in a lot of moral quandaries. I think if you had that approach, I think it was, it's best to go out and find the new profession. Not to say
that's a great insight. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I just, again, we had a lot of people that probably deeper thinkers than I am, but my feeling was, look, I'm not privy to what goes on the seventh floor. And so therefore, I'm not going to second guess anybody. You tell me what the objective is and let's march on and get it done. It's pretty simple from my perspective. Yeah.
So you get the CIA, government, all that stuff, and then you transitioned over to private intelligence, right?
Yeah. Then we because again it was for a very pedestrian reason, and it was I remember talking to one of my direct guys that was the supervisor, boss, whatever you want to call him, who was a great guy, or is a great guy.
He's still alive, guys.
Fantastic. Love the guy to death. He's had a great career. And he told me because I said, look, I got to get out, right? I gotta stay home or at least find something that can keep me home more. And he said, don't leave. You'll regret it. Don't leave. You'll next morning you'll get up and and so I thought about it. I got to do it. And so I, went back to the States and went in and resigned and told, they called him the next day, I think it was, and said, hey, I just woke up and I feel great. I don't regret it at all. But there was that moment where you think, what are we going to do? And I had talked to this buddy of mine that came out of the British teams, and we had talked about starting a business. And, but it's not like we were walking around with a real variety of skills between the two of us. So, what we were going to do was pretty well defined by what we'd been doing.
Right.
So it was intelligence gathering, security services work, risk mitigation. And so we kicked off a little business in London. And like I said, we were able to grow it, much to a lot of people's surprise.
So did you have an MBA or anything in your background? I'm only asking because, as you know, through all my emails, that we're trying to do the same thing, and we're not trying to impede on what you guys are doing. But I don't have an MBA. I don't know what is going on with business, but I do know Intel.
No, we don't have any. Between my buddy and I, we started the business. We had minimal undergraduate degrees. He was educated in England, but I was no standout in college. And in fact, my grades were so poor. I'm sure that the agency wouldn't look twice at me nowadays. They get so many bright kids coming out with incredible degrees and impressive credentials. So I think what actually allowed us to succeed or to build a business, it was we didn't know any better, right? We didn't know that we couldn't do it, and we also didn't have any other way to feed our respective families. So it had to work. And we knew that we had a commodity that was valuable, right? So intelligence. So we knew that if we could just hold out for a little while, we could probably make this thing work, because we weren't pushing 10 and we weren't trying to sell something that we didn't believe in. And so it worked out. It was remarkable. But the first start of the whole thing, neither he nor I had any real wherewithal. It wasn't like we'd saved up any money. Right. So it was really interesting. I remember walking down, Oxford Street with him and trying to figure out how we're going to have, get mobile phones, right? We didn't have any credit history. I didn't have any credit history there. And he was a financial mess. So it was, you get the phones. Okay, now what do we do? Now we got to, who we're going to talk to. It was really simple, right? It's not a business plan type of thing for us, right? And I'm sure we could have jump started. And I'm sure if we had MBAs and we were smarter, we could have grown this thing exponentially from where it went. But we've been happy, and we've hired great people, and they've fed their families, and they've grown up in it. And so it's a good story for us.
Yeah, that's incredible. So from your time at the CIA, government, all government intelligence and all that stuff, now you're the company man, private intelligence. What role do you see private intelligence playing in the future near peer, like warfare, China, Russia, North Korea, that kind of stuff? Do you see private intelligence playing a role in that?
Well, not in the niche that we're in, right? We're sort of we're in an interesting business. I'm in the sort of the human side of things, right? That's how we add value. We don't have massive technical capability. We haven't developed some clever off the shelf, way of data mining and collating information, Palantir or whatever company you want to talk about. We're the business of saying, okay, there's open source information and there's a lot of it, right? There's a great deal of open source out there that can be very valuable. But ultimately, we're adding value and providing context and insight by finding humans who are well placed and for whatever reason willing to talk and provide, some whether even if it's just simple atmospherics, but oftentimes very pointed, specific information that answers specific questions that the clients, the companies that we work with, the law firms and financial institutions and others, the questions that they have. So, I think the private intelligence, the private companies in this sector, the big sector of information security, risk mitigation. I think the ones that will play, the bigger role are the companies like Palantir, are the companies that make most of their jack from contracting with federal government, right? Because they're providing a particular type of technology or capability. Human source intelligence. I think the agency's got that well covered. So they're not going to turn to us. They're not going to turn to us and say, we need some help, on the human side. They're more than welcome to if they'd like to. But we don't do any federal marketing. We're all on the commercial side.
We'll have the ad inserted into here.
Yeah. But I think it is an interesting question. I mean, we were in Iraq, in the early days. We went in, really basically ahead of the troops in 2003. And we watched that whole thing develop, right? And we watched that industry, the private contractor space build, right? Blackwater, that's the one everybody knows, but, Olive and Sandmine and us and a bunch of others, kind of developed out of that. And some of the development wasn't good. Some of it needed more protocols, needed more regulation, needed more discipline, right? There was a lot of, because it was kind of growing and developing on the fly and in the theater, right? There were mistakes made by a number of these companies. And part of it was just control over your operations, control over who you're hiring, right? That's basic management stuff, right? But when you're talking about an environment like Iraq or Afghanistan, you're talking about life or death situation, right? It's not just a management exercise where you might lose some money off the bottom line. So that was a really interesting experience. And anyway, it was, I think for us, we spend all our time in the commercial side of things, and I think because federal marketing is a different cat. And if you're going to do it well, you got to put a fair amount of capital into it and,
right.
Have the right team.
So are you ready to talk about Russia, Ukraine?
Is something happening in Russia and Ukraine? Or
hold on, let me go back and check.
Yeah.
Do you see any? So let me start with what I have seen as far as the OSINT, the open source intelligence on social media, who have done, in my opinion, and you can have a different opinion and please speak to that, but in my opinion, have done an incredible job of just putting the information out there. In that, so we are about to be, if no one knows this right now, we're about to be in a global conflict. And open source intelligence has been putting out all the movements of this is what we've seen that's going to go on, and here's our predictions for it. Do you see that as a benefit to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine in pointing out where Russian troops are or where false flags are being promoted?
Well, I think it's a benefit in a way, right? I mean, I think it's inevitable in a way because of the way information flows and everyone's got a smartphone and it's much easier to monitor whether it's troop movements or, a sort of the flow of information out of the opposition, whatever it may be. I think the good part about that is people are continually reminded, hopefully, that they need to stop and question what they're reading or what they're hearing. They need to think about it. They need to think about what's the source of this, right? So they're not just sucked into some Russian disinformation hole, right? And that they actually understand. And I think there's been some good, general awareness developing over the past few years of this idea of deep fakes and of bots and Russian disinformation, Chinese disinformation, whatever it may be. So I think that's very good, helps to create a more informed public, and that's never a bad thing. But yeah, I don't know that anybody, because the only person that really knows Putin's plans and intentions right now is Putin. I don't know that anybody really has a full grip on just how bad this could get. I mean, if he's psychotic enough to believe that he can get away with pushing past Ukraine and somehow, set his sights on the Baltic states or God forbid, Poland, then he's completely unhinged, right? It's not just a question of, has he gotten to a point in his mind where he doesn't care what the West thinks? If he gets to that point, it's psychotic, right? Because that's something that he's not going to win, right? And I think he's already strategically overreached here if he had just simply stuck to the eastern side of Ukraine, to the Donbass region that, with these two so-called, declared independent republics, and just shore that up. He would have gotten away with it because NATO would kind of shrug a little bit and act a little concerned, and eventually the sanctions would be loosened, and nothing else would happen, and it'd be like what took place with Crimea or Georgia.
Right.
So I think by pushing into Kyiv and then likely setting his sights on overthrowing the government, setting up a puppet regime. If it turns into a painful conflict, if the Ukraine military or the citizenry are able to maintain a resistance, I think one of Putin's real strategic errors here is imagining that the Russian public will put up with it for any period of time.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the stock market in, I don't even know if it's called the stock market in Russia, but it completely collapsed. The ruble is what 1 cent of the US dollar. So what's been amazing to me is seeing the people coming out and protesting against the war. Those people actually obviously getting arrested, and that's a sad thing.
Well, we need to do more. We need to foment that. We need to support that. That's an old covert action, campaign type operation that, in the past we've done very well, influencing, the mindset, influencing opinion, influencing hearts and minds, providing additional information to populations that may not be getting the full picture. So that is something we should be focused on heavily. And frankly, I'm sure we are.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I'm not inside the Pentagon anymore, or inside the intelligence community. I've got my own thing going, but I know those guys are doing what they're supposed to do. And so I do want to just pivot a little bit. I'm sorry to the audience if they want to hear more about Russia, Ukraine. Just keep listening to what we're putting out. But I want to talk about Black Files because I think it's an excellent show. And season 2 comes out in March, correct?
That is true. Thank you very much for mentioning that. The show Black Files Declassified, it's a Discovery Network product. We did the first season, which I think is still streaming on Discovery Plus.
It is.
It'll be out on Science Channel. The second season comes out on Discovery Science Channel. And then I'm sure Discovery Plus as well. Starts 9th March. We spent 8 months filming this new season and just traveled all over the place. And it was great fun. And hopefully everybody enjoys it. But we explore some really, really fascinating things. The whole show concept was, if you want to understand, what the government's doing from an operational perspective, what military operations, intel community operations, all of the fascinating world of black budgets. That's where you start. You start with the budget. You pull the string. You say, where's the money going? It's got to be accounted for somewhere. So that was the original concept. And that's how we end up going into the Black Files and uncovering some really fascinating projects, operations, elements of the government, operational units. Really good stuff. And I give the research team that's with the production company. The production company is there's Bill and Michelle Katz. Shout out to them. They're the executive producers based in Los Angeles, and then the production company putting it all together in Arcadia, believe it or not, in Halifax, Canada. And run by John Wesley Chisholm, and Chris Kingston is director, fantastic guy, and Doug Graham, an amazing shooter, photographer. It's
very well produced, obviously.
Yeah, I can't say enough. That's why I'm banging on about it. I can't say enough good things about these people. They're terrific, but the stories themselves that they put together, great stuff. And I just get to walk around and meet all these people and do these interesting things, and it's great.
Yeah. Now, do you get a lot of say-so in what's being broadcast, or is it like, hey, this is what you need to report on?
Yeah. It is. It's very collaborative. That's a big word. How about that? I just used that word.
Hey, we got more than 3 syllables on this show.
I know.
Welcome, everybody.
Writing that down. Wow. It's good. Yeah. So it is. And we talk about, what could possibly be, in an episode. And then we all kind of look at, what do we want to include in the episode? But it's entertaining. And when you talk to some of these people out there that are engaged, in whether it's something like hypersonic weapons, and you're talking to some material science specialist, or you're looking at the Havana syndrome, and you're talking to guys that are doing the neurological studies on these on the victims. You're looking at advanced aeronautic weapon systems applications. You're looking at unidentified aerial phenomena that the Pentagon's been exploring and trying to understand. It's just you learn something, right? So I think what we're trying to do is to provide something that's entertaining, but you also walk away and you think, oh, I didn't know that before, so maybe I learned something. So it's
I think you do a good job in asking those questions, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the questions that are asked, you're like, I already know the answer to this, but you're doing it for an audience that doesn't really know the answer to these questions. So you'll ask a question and get a good response. It's very educational for it.
Yeah, no, it is. I think you're right. And then I think sometimes I think they brought me in as host because they figured, look, if this guy can understand it.
No, I think they see the face, Mike. They see your face and they're like, that's a face for camera.
That's a camera face right there.
That chiseled jaw right there.
Oh yeah. If you would write that down and send that note to my wife, and
I'll be sure to do that.
Thank you.
If you would just reciprocate.
But yeah, we've done some great things. One of my favorite things was I got a chance to climb into a MiG-15, and it was fantastic. This thing was built in 1954, and when you take off in that thing, it's basically a rocket. You're sitting on a rocket with a couple of little wings, right? And there's really no safety protocols. The Soviets didn't care, right? They were building these things. It wasn't like they were worried about the safety of their pilots. So the crew was strapping me in, and the guy looks at me after we're about ready to launch, and the guy says, "So you've jumped, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I've jumped." And the guy says, "Okay, good." And I looked at him and I said, "That's the safety briefing?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "Try not to when you pull your seatbelt, basically, try not to also let go of your chute. Go over. So I thought, okay, that's good. Really, I appreciate that advice. But as we're taxiing, I'm talking, and the pilot was a great guy, but he said, okay, here's what has to happen. If this thing gets squirrely, we got to obviously get the seat harnesses off, right? And then you got to condense. There's no room in these things, so you got to kind of like this, and then he's got to roll the plane, and you fall out. That's it, right? It's not like there's an ejection system there. You just have to hope you can get that thing up and down and fall out, and then you're good, maybe. So
maybe.
As we're taking off, I'm thinking, I wonder if this negates my insurance policy.
Do you have an insurance policy with Discovery or the Science Channel or anything?
You'd like to think so. You'd like to think that I might have asked that question by now, but by season 2. But you know what? I'm like, they'll say, "Hey, how about you do this?" And I go, "Yeah, it sounds good."
Yeah.
And then typically what I do have to do is run it past my wife, who's the smartest, greatest person I know, and I'll say, "You good with me doing this?" And normally she says yes, because I do have insurance policy. So anyway,
yeah. So that's what I wanted to get into, the Black Files Declassified, because I do think it's an incredible show, and it's showing everybody what is going on. And actually, what you guys talk about, and when you take the black budget and go through it, is typically intelligence analysis, right? We go through budgets and all that kind of stuff, and then we figure out what the future is. And with that, I want to say, you guys started talking about, and I believe it was a manned hypersonic mission, but you guys were talking about hypersonic stuff before anyone else was. I believe that season 1 came out in 2020, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, 2020. No one had ever heard, not no one, I'm sorry.
Right.
But a lot of people had never heard of hypersonic, and that is hypersonic weapons now. Nuclear capable hypersonic weapons are now the future. China, Russia, North Korea. North Korea doesn't have hypersonic, but if they can collaborate with China, they can probably get those, put a nuclear warhead on it. But you guys were the first, 2020.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I appreciate you bringing that up, because if you want to, part of the premise here is if you want to understand the future of warfare or the future of science and technology, right? Look where the money is going. Look where the money's being spent, right? This is critical. The race for the lead in hypersonic technology, right? Primarily unmanned right now, because the material science just is not going to allow for manned hypersonic flight in a meaningful way. But Russia, China, the U.S., it's basically it, right? Because it's massive resources required and skill and engineering capability.
Tons of money going into it.
Right. And, the Chinese regime under Xi, if they don't necessarily have the engineering capability themselves, they'll steal it. So it's an amazing field, and it really is going to change the face. Whoever gets there first with really perfecting hypersonic weapons, it basically what it means is it defeats all the air defense systems that currently exist.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've been talking about is everybody's asked, well, why are you harping so much on hypersonics? And it's like, there's no defense against it. When you can circumnavigate the globe in a certain amount of time, you don't have defenses against that. Think about 20 minutes. A rocket goes off and you have to go figure out where you're going to send your family to.
Right.
That is scary.
Well, and it's if you think about in the old days, the Cold War, which apparently we're back into now, but the original Cold War, the Cold War version 1, a Soviet bomber, maybe 5 hours, to get into U.S. airspace, right? So that's a response time that we have, right? That U.S. leadership has to make a decision, to understand what's happening, and to make a logical response. That's the response time. Then ballistic missile technology came along and significantly cut that back, right? Particularly with sub-launched missile capabilities.
Right.
And so then you're down to 15 minutes, and now you're down to a few minutes. And so hypersonics reduce that response time basically to a meaningless nothing. What does that do? That removes this concept of deterrence, right? And makes a first strike a real possibility in a sense. Because the whole idea was you're not going to take a first strike because there's a response time period and you're going to get hit, right? So that was the deterrence. That's what got us through the Cold War, and that's changing. It has changed, and now it's going to change even more drastically with the perfection of hypersonic weapons capabilities. So that's why it's an important subject, and we dive into it, and it's fascinating stuff. But we look at all sorts of things. We look at the reverse engineering that goes on in that world, right? And how I mean, as an example, Vietnam. I don't want to get this down a rabbit hole here, but one of our episodes.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah,
I've got about 12 hours. What do you want to talk about?
One of the episodes we look at this very classified group called Red Eagles, right? And the Red Eagles were formed essentially, not to simplify it too much, the episode covers it much better, but we went into Vietnam War well behind, and we saw MiGs pop up in the sky, and we were a generation behind, right? And in terms of aircraft development, we had no idea the Soviets were able to do what they were doing with the development of the MiG. And so that was a game changer. And anyway, what happened as a result of that was, look, we gotta figure these things out. Well, what do you do? Well, the idea was, let's get our hands on a couple of these somehow. and now we got to tear them apart, tear them down. And it's not like you get them with the manuals in place. So you have these incredible engineers and pilots willing to fly a plane that they have never flown, have no idea what it can do. The engineers are trying to sort it out. They tear it apart. They put it back together again. And then they learn how to fly it. And then they fly it against our own pilots to teach them how to defeat that weapon system, right? That platform. And that's a fascinating story. And it looks like it's still going on today, which is the whole point of this. We sometimes start with an old operation or government project that's very classified, very secretive, and at some point came out of the dark a little bit. And we look at that and we try to tear it apart. We look at, well, where did it go? What's happening with it now? And then where is it going? Because one thing about government money, particularly black budget money, is once it's in the pot, no one's giving it back, right? That project just morphs into something else.
Right.
So
you're actually looking to increase your funding so you can get more, right?
Right.
We've all, you and I guess I won't speak for you, but we've all been in those meetings where it's like, hey, we have about $12 million. What are we going to spend it on? Oh.
Yeah, it is true. I was never in those meetings because nobody would let me loose. No. But we would get occasionally we would get these messages. So basically, not to simplify it too much, but it was, look, it's coming up on the budget year end.
Yes, that's it. That's what I'm talking about right there.
We need to spend all the rest of this money. Who needs more ammunition, or who needs more, whatever it is that you need.
Because if we don't spend it, we're not going to get it next year.
Right. Yeah. Which is a fascinating way of budgeting, I think, within the government. But yeah, anyway, so that's the concept of the show. Second season coming up 9 March, and we're keen to get out there.
What can we look forward to? You've talked about, so I'll bring spoiler alerts for everybody who hasn't seen the first season. We talk about UFOs in the first season, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about sort of the RoboCop kind of stuff in the first season, where that was such a fascinating episode where you were able to have, and now I forget what it's even called, but you had the sort of like robo arm that helped you fire off an M16 accurately. Yeah. It was incredibly accurate. And then you could run around, and there was it was
a load. It's basically a load carrier that the whole concept of that was the creation of this universal soldier, right? The idea that you're doing everything you're doing is you're trying to create a more efficient, effective, lethal, warrior, and a safer one as well, to the degree you can. But yeah, that was remarkable because it's a big issue, right? You're out there, and your exhaustion can set in. It can really impact the effectiveness of any unit. So how do you do that? And also, how do you provide almost instantaneous feedback on the condition of each soldier, right? So are there things that you can be doing through the use of technology that will provide better data so that you understand, the condition of your resources? I just called soldiers resources. Anyway.
Well, unfortunately,
that sounds very mercenary.
Yeah. Well, that's what we were. I mean, I was there. That's what I was. Yeah. Just a resource.
Just a resource.
Do you have any insights for season 2? What's the big push there?
Yeah,
Like I said, in 2020, you guys talked about hypersonics, and here we are, 2022, and that's the main thing. So, do you see anything in season 2 that we're going to look at in 2 years and go, Mike Baker, keep that guy?
That guy's been releasing secrets left and right. What the?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I'm just thinking through the episodes. I hate to spoil any of them, and theoretically, I'm not supposed to talk about it.
Yeah, your producers hate for you to spoil.
Yeah, they don't want to go. But there are some revelations. There are some things that we look at that are just fascinating. And I will say one of them starts out with the old MK Ultra program.
Oh wow, awesome!
Yeah, it goes well beyond that. And the reason why we wanted to do that was because of this Havana syndrome that's going on. Right, the Havana syndrome problem is really it's a fascinating and very difficult and very serious matter that I think finally the government is taking seriously. They weren't necessarily at the outset, and there's still varying degrees of the way that it's being dealt with, how it's being perceived. But in looking at it as a targeted, directed energy attack by a hostile nation, by that I probably mean Russia. I think that.
Don't get us canceled, Mike. Come on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Why you guys are sponsored by VTB, the Russian bank. Yeah. So
should I bring the Putin doll out now, or should we wait till later?
Yeah, Putin's just waiting for the weather to clear before he crosses the channel and invades England.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Who would have thought, right? I mean, it really is. You got an egotistical dictator marching through another country in Europe. Feels like 1939.
Right.
And it's also feels like 1960 with the Cold War aspects to it.
Yeah.
You got China being increasingly aggressive and bellicose. It's a very strange time. And I think coming out of 2 years of the pandemic, not necessarily what we were all hoping for.
Well, we were promised, Mike, the Roaring '20s before we got into World War III, and we never got it.
No, not yet. Not yet. And I'm hoping that I do think where this may well end up is I think the Ukraine military, I think, and probably the Ukraine government will look and say the better course of action may well be to capitulate. And again, it's not negotiation. Putin's going to make some demands. Now, if he
that's a great distinction. It's not a capitulation. Yeah. It's a negotiation.
Yeah, no, it's just he's gonna make certain demands, and I think if any of his demands include walking NATO back to whatever pre-1990 stage, I think he's at that point, I think he's going to realize there's a real problem here, and he really has overreached. I'm hoping that the Ukrainian military and the population can really put up a fight here and really make this an extremely painful exercise for Putin. Because the only reason he's doing this is the part that drives me crazy, not to disappear down a rabbit hole here, but the part that drives me crazy is people talk about, well, look, Putin had, these national security concerns about having a NATO friendly country on his border. This had nothing to do with Russian national security. This had nothing to do with the security of the Russian population. None of that. That's all complete horseshit. All it has to do with is Putin's desire to stay in power. That's the only threat that a democratic country on Russia's border presents, is a threat to Putin's power, not to national security or threat to the Russian population. It's simply Putin worried about staying in power. So all that horseshit that people have been spewing about, well, people should have taken him seriously about his concerns over this threat. Bullshit. Anyway, that's the last of that for me.
All right. I love it. That is staying in the podcast for anyone listening. I don't care who has another opinion. But with all that, can I kind of transition over to China? Because you're a Chinese hardliner. Correct me if I'm wrong. I am as well. So before telling my predictions on China and Taiwan, what are your predictions on China's plans with Taiwan?
Well, I mean, I think it's clear over the years that China has a intention. And they'll act on it. It's a one China policy that we've all bizarrely lived with, and by bizarre I mean it is. If you think about it, other than abstractly, if you think about real terms, it is so strange. But Xi fully intends to, how do you want to put it, reclaim Taiwan, absorb Taiwan, and he probably looks at what's happening currently, and if anything, it's accelerating his timetable. It's not. There's nothing that's happening right now regarding Russia and China, or sorry, Russia and Ukraine, or anything that the current U.S. administration is doing that is making Xi think, maybe I shouldn't, right? Maybe I should back off. Maybe I shouldn't be as aggressive as I am in the South China Sea. Maybe I shouldn't be doing some of the things that we're doing. No, there's nothing that he's saying that's doing anything other than making him think, perhaps I can accelerate this timetable. And perhaps the time to do this is during the current U.S. administration, perhaps. That may be, what he's thinking. Again, it's dangerous sometimes to over speculate, but that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah, and I feel the exact same way. So my prediction has been that President Xi is going to sit back and look at this and see, if it's just sanctions. So China has so much influence monetarily, economically in the Western world that if it's just sanctions to Russia, he's going to understand that China can absorb those sanctions because those countries and, organizations like the NBA, who are very pro-China, are going to help them out. And there's not going to be a lot of economic repercussions for that.
Yeah, I think it's the idea that we would go into a military conflict with China over Taiwan. I think she probably thinks that's this, less than 0% chance that would happen. That would be his calculation anyway. And so I think we have to reimagine, what that may look like, because whereas perhaps 10 years ago we thought, well, that won't happen in our lifetime. I think that the world is changing. And unless we have an aggressive response, but again, you ask yourself, what does that mean? We have very few leverage points here when we're talking about China, and so I don't see where that ends particularly well. And Taiwan, strategically, much more important to us than Ukraine. Not that Ukraine is not important, not that it's not tragic what's happening there, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just talking in pragmatic terms. Taiwan is a strategically more important issue.
Right. Yeah. And I think the entire continent of Asia agrees with that, with Japan, South Korea, viewing Taiwan as its own entity. And then China, as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, yes, Russia has invaded Ukraine. Yeah. I think those countries saw that, and they obviously said, well, we need to try to protect Ukraine. Now, China saw it, and what did they do? They immediately started ramping up their air operations around the country.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they've been increasing, on several levels. The speed with which they've been building up their naval capabilities. They never have stopped their economic espionage and theft of intellectual property and research and development. I mean, that's been marching on despite a few years back, a supposed agreement between President Obama at the time and Xi that they wouldn't engage in that sort of activity, which I found absolutely hilarious, because It's been decades where the Chinese have just been, the regime, again, has been hoovering up everything they can, not just from the U.S., but from, the West. And that's how they got where they are so far.
Now, did you see the recent reporting that U.S. intelligence showed China what Russia was doing in Ukraine, and kind of pushed out their intelligence to China in the hopes that China would reciprocate and join the U.S. and NATO and the Western Europe against Russian aggression towards Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a surprising bit. The idea that we would I mean, I see what they were thinking from a theoretical perspective. And if it was, you share some intelligence, you try to get them on the same sheet of music, and that would be fine if it was anybody but China, because it's not how this regime works. And right now, and we've seen this over in recent history, there are moments in time where the interests of China and the interests of Russia align, right? And it's not a super tight relationship, right? And often there's problems within it, but they have shown this ability to come together when it suits both of them. And it's always been when it targets us, the U.S., right? Primarily. And so the idea that somehow Xi would look at that intelligence and go, yeah, well, you're right. We got to do something about Putin. Rather than sharing it with Putin at this moment in time, is pretty naive. Right? But there's been a number of steps recently that are surprising in the way that we're approaching this current conflict and this current problem. And I do worry that, somehow the U.S. administration and NATO in particular are living in the world they'd like to imagine, right? Rather than dealing with what we've got in reality. So I know that sounds, perhaps a little bit overly political.
No, not. I mean, come on.
I'm a centrist. I see good on both sides, right? I see and I think, the problem we've got now is people aren't living in the middle, right? Nobody lives in the middle, and you rarely can get anything done. So, I'm just a small government person who thinks, you got to compromise at times. You got to live in the center. And the problem is, on the fringes on both sides, where everybody's just throwing hand grenades at each other.
Yeah. I started this under the hypothesis that people wanted to hear the centrist view. And I've learned throughout all this that might not be.
Yeah, I think people get angry when you say, look, maybe the other side has a point here. They don't have a point here. Maybe we could negotiate. Maybe we could compromise. And that tends to piss people off nowadays. But the world, that's not how things get done in the world. It's not all black and white. It's not all. It's not just there's one answer. We can multitask, right? We can do more. And I kind of worry. I'm not sure how we walk this dog back in terms of this hyper partisanship that exists in the U.S. anyway. But I'm not sure how we disappeared down that rabbit hole.
Well, I think my first message to you was, hey, look, we're not political. We're not going to get into politics. And here we are talking about the left and right and the egregious mistakes both are making. But let's lighten it up a little bit here. But I always want to finish it up with this final question about your favorite duty location or your favorite location to travel.
Oh, favorite location to travel.
Outside the U.S., because I know you love Alaska. You had a lot of good fishing out there.
Yeah.
I won't mention another state you love that you like to live in so that no one from California goes out there.
But it's a good question. Look, I was born in England. I still have my British citizenship, and so I love going back there and visiting. I have some wonderful friends there, and it's always a pleasure. I suppose, if you said you can only go one place in this world, and then that's it, we're going to push you in front of a bus. I would probably say Venice, Italy.
Interesting.
Yeah, but not during the tourist season. That's the caveat. Can't be during the summer. But you go there in January, February, March. There's just something about it, and I just think that might be. And I think it's probably what you talked about earlier. You sometimes you associate something you were doing in the city, and I just had great memories of bouncing around that city. In between work. And I just think that, it's a special place. And the food's fantastic. Doesn't hurt.
Italian.
Yeah. So that's it. How about you? What's yours?
Oh my goodness. Oh man. So I tell everyone that I can talk to about this. I spent a lot of time in Poland, and we have a huge not huge, but we have a lot of listeners from Poland because of my time there. And I say that in a past life, I should have been born in, I was probably born in Poland. I love the food. I love the beer. The people are just awesome.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the place that I really like, that I really like the most. I had some issues in Italy, but that's for another time. I will say,
if I couldn't do Italy, my one of my favorite workplaces was always, and I guess if and for a variety of other reasons, would be Beirut in the Lebanon.
Oh wow! Yeah,
and it's fantastic. The people are amazing, great. It's a beautiful setting, and it's such a dynamic, interesting place. Again, the food's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go. Beirut, Venice.
Yeah. Now, we went out to London, and I always thought, I'm not going to like this, but we went to Dirty Dick's, toured around the Tube and stuff like that. And I just had a fantastic time.
Yeah. It's an amazing city. It's still one of the greatest places to.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And then, but the entire, the UK is beautiful. You get up to Scotland, get through Ireland. It's gorgeous. So it's again, I'm subjective, but it's a great place.
Well, and not to take too much more of your time, but I'm kind of fascinated because you were formerly a UK. Well, you still are a UK citizen, right?
Yeah.
So how did that affect your CIA career?
It didn't.
Okay.
I suppose if I was a Russian citizen, that might have had an impact. So that would be a problem. But no, there's no issue. There is no daylight between the UK and the US in matters that actually matter.
Right.
People talk about the special relationship. It is that. And so that's an important thing. But I think overall, you were hoping, I guess everybody was hoping that we come out of the pandemic, hey, get back to living, right? Everybody climb out of their foxholes. I think it was time to climb out a while back and get back to the business of living. And part of that is travel, right? So I always encourage, we love to take our kids anywhere, basically.
Yeah, we are the same way. We did a tour of Europe, did Paris, the Netherlands, Brussels, all that kind of stuff. I always say, especially, so I'm from a small town in Louisiana, and I was brought up in an evangelical home, and so I had that sort of worldview of everything. And then I got out of there, and it kind of expanded my worldview. And then I went out to the Middle East and Africa, and then took the kids out to Europe, and it kind of expanded that worldview. And so I kind of try to tell everybody, if you can afford it, go to Europe, go to Africa. I spent time in Kenya, and it was the most incredible people I've ever met.
Yeah. There are some amazing places to go in Africa. That's still one of my. Well, she had a business trip a little while back to Ghana and had just an amazing time. And I mean, there's just so many interesting places to go. Algeria, still one of my favorite places. So you know what, you can find something interesting and fascinating pretty much anywhere you go, I think. And so you got to be curious. You got to, that's
that Ted Lasso line, I guess, right? Be curious.
That's a good line. I haven't watched Ted Lasso. I should.
I mean, I always promote it, but if you are a cynical person, don't watch Ted Lasso because you'll just be furious. But if you want something that's lighthearted and you like things like, if you like good news and lighthearted stuff, it's a great thing. So, that line, be judgmental, not, or be inquisitive, not judgmental, is just a great line. And I take that to Africa a lot.
Yeah. And places down in South America, fantastic. Central America, it's just one of those things. And like you said, if you can afford it, and that's, so you realize sometimes, obviously that's luxury, but it's not. I mean, now with air travel, sometimes we'll get these alerts and says, hey, you can fly to wherever, to Sao Paulo for $20, or
right.
It's incredible what you can do on a small budget to get around the world, right? And sometimes that's the best. And my wife's a big believer in that. Sometimes that's the best way to travel is, just with a backpack, and you find yourself in one-star place and you get out of it.
That's easy for a CIA operative who has a 48 or 72-hour bag right by their door, and they can just go out.
Yeah. Well, but you don't need much, and I think that's
true. Very true.
Yeah. You don't need much, and but it's a great. It's a great. There's so many. It's a great question that you ask, because it does make you start to think about all the places you've been, and you can't separate where you've been from what you were doing there, right? So, that colors your sort of perception. There's a handful of places I would never ever want to go back to because of everything went sideways, and so no matter how.
It's a great distinction. I love that distinction, because you think about little insight into here. Maybe this will be deleted out if my kids tell me to delete this out, but they asked me, what was your favorite what was your favorite war to be a part of, which is a child's question.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And I said, you know what, I really enjoyed my time in Afghanistan, and it had nothing to do with killing anybody or advancing towards the enemy. It had everything to do with the people I engaged with at that time frame. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about American special operations. I'm talking about Afghanis that I spent with on a day-to-day basis. It was incredible. And that was some of my favorite time to be there. And so for you to distinguish between what we were actually doing and the actual time that you spent there, I think it's a distinct or a significant distinction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It completely colors your perception of wherever you happen to be at the time. But it's a great question. It's a really good one I'll start asking you.
I'll give you that one. Well, Mike, thank you so very much. And I know I've said that hundreds of times to you throughout this process, but I really do appreciate it. I never thought I'd be sitting here talking to Mike Baker, the company man.
It's been great talking to you too, man. Let's do this again.
Yeah.
After things settle and Putin gets his ass kicked and the Russian population rises up and realizes what a scum he is, then let's get back together and talk about it.
Definitely. Don't forget to tell Joe about me. Come on.
Tell him.
No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, thank you. Thank you so much.
Good, of course. Man. Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
Once again, we want to thank Mike Baker for coming on the show. Also, you can find Mike on Twitter at mbcompanyman and through his company's website, portmansquaregroup.com. Also, don't forget to check out his show Black Files Declassified on the Science Channel Discovery Plus, or purchase the episodes through Amazon Prime Video. Season 2 of Black Files Declassified begins on March 9th. And as always, if you enjoyed this conversation, please join our community at oakwindanalytics.com. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Insightful Inquiries.